Blood is thicker than water, but money is the ultimate acid test for family. When my brother faced federal wire fraud charges, my mother drained her entire life savings to keep him out of a cell. But 14 months later, when my life was literally on the line, her pockets were suddenly empty. If you looked up golden child syndrome in a psychology textbook, you'd find an 8x10 glossy photograph of my younger brother, Liam. Growing up in our middle-class home in the suburbs of Seattle, the rules were always bifurcated. I was the reliable one. I got the straight A's, worked a part-time job at a local bakery from the age of 15, and paid my own way through state college. Liam, on the other hand, was the charismatic hurricane. He was handsome, possessed a silver tongue, and had a knack for convincing our mother, Barbara, that the sun rose and set entirely for his benefit. When Liam crashed my mother's car at 19, it was a lapse in judgment. When I forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer, it was a profound lack of respect for the household. My father passed away when we were in our early 20s, leaving behind a modest life insurance policy and a paid-off 4-bedroom house. I grieved quietly and threw myself into my career as a freelance UI/UX designer. Liam grieved loudly, dropped out of college, and started a string of businesses that inevitably collapsed, each time requiring a financial safety net woven entirely by our mother. The real disaster struck 3 years ago when Liam was 28. He had started a cryptocurrency investment firm called Aura Stream. For about 8 months, he lived like a king. He leased a matte black Range Rover, wore $3,000 suits, and posted photos from VIP tables in Las Vegas. Mom was insufferably proud. "He's an entrepreneur, Chloe," she'd tell me over Sunday dinners, cutting my protests off before they began. "He just thinks bigger than you do." Then, the FBI raided his high-rise apartment. Aura Stream wasn't a business, it was a glorified Ponzi scheme. Liam hadn't just mismanaged funds, he had actively defrauded nearly 40 investors out of over $1 million. The federal charges included grand larceny, wire fraud, and money laundering. He was facing up to 15 years in federal prison. The day the news broke, I rushed to my mother's house. I found her pacing the living room, weeping hysterically, clutching her rosary. Liam was sitting on the sofa, looking pale and terrified, but still managing to play the victim. "It was an accounting error, Chloe," he stammered. "My partner screwed me over. I didn't know." "We need the best lawyer in the state," my mother declared, her eyes bloodshot. "I'm not letting my baby go to a federal penitentiary." She found him. A high-powered criminal defense attorney named Arthur Sterling. His retainer alone was $75,000. I begged her to think rationally. "Mum, you can't afford this," I pleaded with her in the kitchen while Liam sulked in the living room. "He needs a public defender. He committed a federal crime. If you pay for this, you'll ruin your retirement." She slapped me. It was a sharp, stinging backhand that echoed against the tile backsplash. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with venom. "He is your brother. We are family. We do not abandon family when they are drowning. If you aren't going to help, then get out of my house." I left, rubbing my cheek, a sickening knot forming in my stomach. Over the next 6 months, I watched my mother systematically dismantle her financial security. She drained her 401k, taking the massive tax penalty on the chin. She sold my late father's prized 1968 Mustang, a car he had restored with his own hands. When that wasn't enough to cover the escalating legal fees and the restitution deal Sterling was negotiating, she did the unthinkable. She took out a massive reverse mortgage on the family home. In total, she spent nearly $240,000. It worked. Sterling was worth every predatory penny. Through a complex plea deal, restitution agreements, and throwing a co-founder under the bus, Liam avoided prison time. He was sentenced to 5 years of strict probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and ordered to pay back a fraction of the missing funds. Liam moved back into his childhood bedroom. Mum cooked his favorite meals, did his laundry, and told everyone at her church how brave he had been through his ordeal. I kept my distance, sickened by the entire spectacle, but I told myself that it was her money, her choice. I had my own life, a small apartment downtown, and a growing design agency. I didn't need them, or so I thought. 14 months later, my independent life began to fracture. It started subtly, a persistent tingling in my left leg that I chalked up to sitting at my desk too long. Then came the migraines, blinding, nauseating pain that would leave me in a dark room for days. When I started dropping coffee mugs because my left hand would inexplicably go numb, I finally went to the doctor. After weeks of misdiagnoses, physical therapy, and terrifying uncertainty, an MRI revealed the truth. I sat in Dr. Harrison's sterile, fluorescent-lit office, clutching a tissue as he pointed to a large white mass pressing against my spinal cord on the black and white scan. It was a spinal meningioma. While technically benign, its location was catastrophic. It was growing rapidly, wrapping around the nerves. "Chloe, if we don't operate to remove this within the next 2 months, the nerve damage will become permanent," Dr. Harrison said gently, adjusting his glasses. "You will lose the ability to walk. The paralysis could eventually affect your upper body as well." The room spun. I was 30 years old. The thought of being confined to a wheelchair, unable to work, unable to hike, unable to live my life, felt like a death sentence. "Okay," I choked out. "Let's schedule it. Whatever it takes." Then came the second blow. The surgery required a highly specialized neurosurgeon because of how intricately the tumor was wrapped around my spinal cord. The only surgeon in the state with the specific expertise to guarantee I wouldn't wake up paralyzed was Dr. Aris Thorne at the Seattle Neurological Institute. My insurance company, a mid-tier plan I bought through the freelancer exchange, flat out denied the out-of-network claim. They deemed the specialized surgeon experimental and unproven for my specific bracket of coverage, insisting I use an in-network surgeon who told me point-blank he had a 60% chance of paralyzing my left leg. I appealed. I fought. I spent hours on the phone, crying to unfeeling customer service reps. Denied. To go with the specialist, I had to pay out of pocket. The hospital required a massive deposit up front before they would even book the OR. The total out-of-pocket cost for the surgeon's fee, the facility, and the specialized post-op care was $42,000. I had exactly $14,000 in savings. I lived comfortably, but the tech sector had taken a hit, and freelance contracts had been slow. I was $28,000 short. If I couldn't come up with the money in 6 weeks, I would lose my mobility forever. Swallowing my pride, my resentment, and every ounce of independence I possessed, I drove to my mother's house. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Liam was, predictably, asleep on the couch playing video games when I walked in. I ignored him and asked my mother to come into the kitchen. We sat at the same table where she had slapped me over a year ago. I laid the medical files, the MRI scans, and the hospital's billing estimate between us. My hands were shaking. Through tears, I explained everything: the tumor, the risk of paralysis, the insurance denial, the ticking clock. "Mum, I am terrified," I wept, reaching out to grasp her hands. "I know things have been hard financially since Liam's case. I know you sacrificed everything. But I need $28,000. It's a loan. I will sign a legally binding contract. I will pay you back with interest. I can't lose my legs. Please, I have nowhere else to go." My mother looked at the scans. Her expression softened for a fleeting moment, a flicker of genuine maternal concern. But then her eyes darted toward the living room, where the muffled sounds of Liam's video game were echoing. Her face hardened into a mask of tragic martyrdom. She pulled her hands away from mine. "Oh, Chloe," she sighed, a heavy, theatrical sound. "You know I would do anything for you. You are my daughter. But you know what happened. You know what the lawyers cost. I'm on a fixed income now. The reverse mortgage eats up half of what your father left me." "Mum, there has to be something," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "A home equity line, a personal loan. You have excellent credit. I will make the monthly payments. You won't have to pay a dime. I just need you to co-sign or take out the loan because I don't have the collateral." She shook her head, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "I can't take on more debt, Chloe. My blood pressure is already through the roof. Liam is still struggling to find a job with a felony on his record. He relies on me for groceries, for gas. I simply have nothing left to give. You're a smart girl. You'll have to figure this out with your insurance, or use the other doctor." "The other doctor will paralyze me," I screamed, finally losing my composure. Liam sauntered into the kitchen, grabbing an apple from the bowl. "Geez, Chloe, keep it down. Mum's stressed enough as it is. Don't come in here demanding money when you know we're broke." I stared at him, my own brother, healthy, standing on 2 working legs, chewing an apple paid for by the mother he bankrupted. A wave of pure, unadulterated hatred washed over me. "I have nothing," Mum repeated, crossing her arms. "I'm sorry, Chloe, but you've always been so independent. You'll find a way." I left the house feeling numb, not from the tumor, but from the realization that to my mother, my life was worth less than my brother's freedom to avoid the consequences of his own crimes. But the real knife twist didn't happen that day. It happened 3 days later. I had accidentally left a folder of my medical documents at her house. I drove back on a Friday morning. Mum's car was gone. She had mentioned she had a dentist appointment. I used my spare key to let myself in to grab the folder off the kitchen counter. Next to my medical folder was a stack of mail she had opened. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. But the bold red logo of Fidelity Investments caught my eye. It was a quarterly statement. I looked closer. My heart stopped. The statement was for a high-yield savings account in my mother's name. The current balance was $82,450. My mind raced. How? I thought she drained everything. Then I remembered the life insurance policy my father had left. She told me years ago she had put a chunk of it away in a do-not-touch account, but I assumed she had liquidated it for Liam's lawyers. She hadn't. She had kept a secret nest egg. She had $82,000. She needed to loan me $28,000 to save me from life in a wheelchair. And she had looked me dead in the eye and said she had nothing. But it got worse. Right beneath the account balance was the recent transaction history. 3 weeks ago, there was a withdrawal, a wire transfer for $18,000. The memo line on the printed receipt underneath the statement made bile rise in my throat. It read, "Transfer to L. Anderson, Audi down payment / fresh start." She hadn't just lied to me. She had actively chosen to buy her felon son a luxury car rather than pay for the surgery to save her daughter's legs. I stood in the silent kitchen, the paper trembling in my hands, as a cold, dangerous calm settled over me. The Chloe who played by the rules, who suffered in silence, died in that room. If family was just a transaction to them, it was time for me to collect my debts. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the fidelity statement across the room or shatter my mother's favorite porcelain vases. The betrayal was too absolute, too profound for a childish tantrum. Instead, a glacial, terrifying clarity washed over me. I pulled out my phone and meticulously photographed every page of the bank statement, ensuring the account numbers, my mother's name, and the $18,000 wire transfer for Liam's Audi were in crystal clear focus. I put the papers exactly where I found them, grabbed my medical folder, and walked out the front door. I had 48 hours to secure the $28,000 for Dr. Gregory Mitchell, the only neurosurgeon capable of saving my mobility. I was out of options, so I did the only thing left. I went to my biggest client to resign. His name was Silas Kensington. He was a self-made tech billionaire who had founded Aegis Financial, a disruptor in the digital banking space. I had been the lead UI/UX designer on their new flagship app for the past 6 months. Silas was known in the industry as a ruthless, brilliant pragmatist who despised incompetence and valued loyalty above all else. I walked into his expansive corner office in downtown Seattle, leaning heavily on a cane because the numbness in my left leg was worsening by the hour. I handed him my hard drive and a formal letter of resignation. Silas, a sharp-featured man in his late 40s with piercing grey eyes, frowned at the letter. "What is this, Chloe? The beta launch is in 3 weeks. You don't quit. You're the best designer on my payroll." "I have a spinal tumor, Mr. Kensington," I said, my voice dead flat. "If I don't get surgery by Friday, I will be permanently paralyzed. My insurance denied the specialist, and I am $28,000 short for the out-of-pocket cost. I won't be able to sit at a desk, let alone code, for months. I'm sorry." Silas didn't offer empty platitudes. He leaned back, steepled his fingers, and analyzed me. "Why aren't your parents paying for it?" The question broke the dam. I don't know why, but I told him everything. I told him about Liam's federal fraud conviction, my mother draining her retirement to keep him out of prison, the reverse mortgage, and the devastating discovery of the hidden $82,000 account that she was using to buy my felon brother a luxury car while letting me face life in a wheelchair. Silas's jaw tightened. Having built his empire from nothing, he had a zero-tolerance policy for fraudsters and parasites. He pulled out a heavy, leather-bound checkbook, quickly scribbled a series of numbers, and slid it across the mahogany desk. It was a cashier's check for $45,000. "Consider this an advance on your next 2 years of retainer fees with Aegis," Silas said, his voice laced with cold authority. "Go get your surgery. Recover. But Chloe, I expect a return on my investment. Parasites like your brother don't stop feeding until you cut them off. When you're healed, you are going to handle your family problem. If you need my legal team's resources, you have them." I took the check, my hands trembling. "Thank you. I will pay every cent back." "Just fix your spine," he commanded. "Then fix your life." The surgery took 9 hours. When I woke up in the recovery room, Dr. Mitchell was standing over me with a tired but victorious smile. He asked me to wiggle my left toes. I did. The crushing pressure on my spinal cord was gone. I was going to walk again. During my 6 weeks of intensive physical therapy and bed rest, I didn't contact my mother or brother once. They didn't reach out either, assuming I was somewhere quietly accepting my grim fate. Little did they know, I was using my bedridden hours to execute a digital autopsy on my brother's life, heavily aided by a private investigator, recommended by Silas. What I found was staggering. Liam wasn't just driving a new Audi while claiming indigence to his federal probation officer. He was running a brand new scam. He had set up a shadow entity called Pinnacle Strategic Consulting, LLC. Because he was a convicted felon, barred from operating financial businesses, the registered agent and sole listed owner of the LLC was Barbara Anderson, my mother. Liam was using the LLC to funnel money from new, unsuspecting investors in a fake real estate syndication deal. He was violating his federal probation in spectacular fashion, and my mother, by allowing him to use her name, her address, and her hidden Fidelity account to wash the money, was actively committing a felony, aiding and abetting wire fraud, and hiding assets from a federal restitution order. The pieces were on the board. It was time for checkmate. 2 months after my surgery, I received a text from my mother. It was Liam's 30th birthday, and she was hosting a Sunday dinner. "Chloe, we haven't heard from you. Come over for dinner. Liam is turning 30. Family needs to stick together. Bring your laptop. Liam needs some website help." The sheer audacity made me laugh out loud. I texted back, "I'll be there." I spent the morning compiling my dossier. I had the Fidelity bank statements, the state LLC registration documents with my mother's signature, IP logs showing Liam was running the fraudulent Pinnacle website from her basement, and photographs of the $60,000 Audi parked in a rented garage 3 blocks from their house. My final call was to Agent Thomas Brody, the seasoned, no-nonsense federal probation officer assigned to Liam's case. I had sent him a secure, encrypted file the night before. "Agent Brody," I said into the phone, watching the rain fall against my apartment window. "Are your people ready?" "We are, Ms. Anderson," Brody replied, his voice gruff. "Your brother is in direct violation of a federal judge's order, and the evidence you provided on the new wire fraud gives us a solid mandate. We'll move in at 6 p.m. At 5:45 p.m., I parked my car down the street from my childhood home. I stepped out, leaving my cane in the passenger seat. My leg was strong, my spine was straight. I walked through the front door without knocking. The smell of pot roast filled the air. Liam was sitting at the dining table, wearing a designer watch, pouring himself a glass of expensive bourbon. My mother was bustling around the kitchen. They both froze when I walked into the dining room. My mother dropped a serving spoon, her eyes wide as they darted from my face down to my legs. "Chloe!" she gasped, her hand flying to her chest. You're walking? How? You said you needed—" "I found a benefactor," I said smoothly, taking a seat directly across from Liam. "Someone who actually values my life." "How's the new consulting business, Liam?" Liam bristled, setting his glass down. "It's none of your business. And frankly, showing up here after ignoring us for months just to cop an attitude is pathetic." I smiled, opening the thick manila envelope I had brought with me. I slid the first document across the table, the Fidelity statement. $82,000, Mum, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You looked me in the eye and told me you had nothing. You let me believe I was going to be paralyzed while you wired 18 grand for an Audi. My mother's face drained of all color. She looked at the paper, then at Liam, pure panic setting in. Chloe, you don't understand. That was your father's. It was a safety net. Liam needed a car for meetings. Meetings for Pinnacle Strategic Consulting? I interrupted, sliding the LLC registration papers toward her. The fake company you registered in your name so your felon son could run a second Ponzi scheme from your basement. Liam stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. "You shut your mouth, Chloe. You hacked my stuff. You crazy bitch, I'll have you arrested." "You aren't calling anyone, Liam," I replied, checking my watch. It was exactly 6 p.m. Heavy, authoritative knocks pounded on the front door. "Federal agents, open the door!" my mother screamed. Liam physically stumbled backward, tripping over the rug, his face contorting in absolute terror. "What did you do?" my mother shrieked at me, tears streaming down her face as the front door was forced open. Agent Brody and 3 armed U.S. Marshals flooded into the dining room. Brody didn't waste a second. "Liam Anderson, you are under arrest for violating the terms of your federal probation, wire fraud, and concealment of assets." 2 marshals grabbed Liam, slamming him over the dining table, sending his expensive bourbon crashing to the floor as they clicked the steel cuffs around his wrists. He was sobbing, begging our mother to do something. But Brody wasn't finished. He turned to my mother, who was hyperventilating against the kitchen counter. "Barbara Anderson, we also have a warrant to seize all financial assets connected to your name, including the hidden fidelity account used to fund this illicit enterprise. You are also being investigated for aiding and abetting federal fraud." "She's my daughter," my mother wailed, pointing a shaking finger at me as they hauled Liam toward the door. "She set us up. Chloe, how could you do this to your own blood?" I stood up, adjusting my coat, looking at the woman who had birthed me, who had been willing to sacrifice my body for her favorite son's vanity. "Blood is just biology, Mum," I said, my voice echoing in the silent, shattered room. "You taught me that money is what really matters. Enjoy bankruptcy." The fallout was absolute, and the karma was swift. Liam's probation was permanently revoked. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. Because my mother had actively participated in hiding assets, the federal government seized the $82,000 account to pay back Liam's victims. They also placed a lien on the family house, forcing it into a foreclosure sale. At 62 years old, my mother lost everything. Left with nothing but a ruined reputation and empty pockets, she had to find a way to pay rent for a tiny, run-down apartment across town. Last I heard, the woman who once looked down on my hard work was now wearing a stained uniform, working the graveyard shift as a waitress at a 24-hour highway diner, surviving entirely on the tips of strangers. I never spoke to either of them again. I paid Silas Kensington back within a year, expanded my design agency, and never took a single step for granted. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty and the choices we make when the chips are down. My mother chose a criminal over her daughter, and the universe delivered exactly what they both deserved. Today, I walk on my own 2 feet, running a successful company, while they pay the ultimate price for their greed. Karma doesn't just hit back, it completely levels the playing field.